It's time for the No Nonsense Roundtable. Insights to capture your imagination from people you know and people you'd like to know about. Each week, a different guest from a different walk of life. Now, here is the host of the No Nonsense Roundtable, Dom Genova.
So welcome to another edition of the No Nonsense Roundtable. I'm here today with somebody who's going to talk about a very, very, very important topic. And her name is Teresa Galbier. And she is the executive director of the Alzheimer's Association of Rochester and the Finger Lakes. And I have to tell you, personally, I am awfully interested in what she has to say because it's something that I know very, very little about. I think a lot of people in our audience would be interested in hearing what she has to say. And thank you for being here. I'm looking forward to this.
Thank you for having me, Dom.
Well, the question I'd like to ask first, is how did you get here? I mean, your path in life, just a couple of minute thumbnail sketch of how you got to be doing what you're doing.
Dom, I think I always knew that I was going to be working in service from my college days as an undergrad, and I'm a product of state university colleges, from Jamestown Community College to SUNY Buffalo to SUNY Brockport. And throughout that journey, I always knew that I wanted to do something that when I put my head on my pillow back at night, that I felt it was a day well done.
Mm-hmm. Leaving the place a little better than the way you found it. To people like you don't do it for the money. I know that. So your path in life, I mean, you didn't start out as the executive director of the Alzheimer's Association. So previous jobs, how did you get here with previous jobs?
Well, and I've worked in human services my whole career. So when I was in college in Buffalo, I had an opportunity to do an internship with the Cantillation Center, which was at the time a school for children with developmental disabilities. Mm-hmm. It's now a wonderful organization that provides supports and services to people with developmental disabilities of all ages. But that was my start, and I said, oh my gosh, this is really where I belong. So I spent a good part of my career working in that field with folks with DD. And then I started learning about older folks with regard to supports and services, and I think it's the sweetest population on the planet. And I said to myself, wouldn't it be grand if I could marry two of the best, most important populations, those with developmental disabilities and those who were aging, and find my way? And so I had an opportunity to come actually to Rochester to develop a program for people with DD who were aging. There were no supports for them at the time. And so I worked with a team with some small amounts of state funding to actually develop retirement programs for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And that set me off on the next phase of my career. And then this door opened for me at the Alzheimer's Association in 1998. I stepped through it, and I actually was there for 11 years, had a little bit of a hiatus, and I was given an opportunity, which is not often given to executives, an opportunity to return to the place that I had loved. And I rejoined the association in 2014. And this is my capstone. And I can't imagine being anywhere else, Dom.
I'm so happy to have you here because there's so many things that we need to know about the disease, misconceptions and treatments. It affects so many people that either have the disease or caregivers that are taking care of their parents. And what is the most important thing people need to know about the disease, all told?
There is a misconception that this happens because people get old. And Alzheimer's is not an aging process. Alzheimer's is a disease of the brain. It destroys the brain, and eventually the person dies because of Alzheimer's disease. It is tragic. It's fatal. There is no cure today. There's no prevention. It is the only disease in the top 10 public health issues in this country today that has no cure prevention or major treatment. And so it's serious. This is serious business. And it's something that is incredibly heartbreaking for the person. But as you mentioned about the caregiver, it's really a caregiver issue because the family becomes that sole person or unit to take care of the person along the way. For the most part, most people living with Alzheimer's are taken care of by their family members in this country. And so it's important that we're there to not only support the person living with the disease, but to provide the care and support to the family members and the professional caregivers so that they don't feel isolated and have to walk this journey alone. It is incredibly challenging, trying, and heartbreaking.
How long is it, generally speaking, from diagnosis to it playing itself out to that ultimate terrible place it does?
So it's actually been referred to as the long goodbye. So it depends on the type of Alzheimer's or dementia that the person has. It could be fairly rapid, 3 to 5 years. But you can see folks living with the disease up to 20 years. Oftentimes when we get the phone calls and we sit with families and they start sharing with us, we'll ask them, what are you seeing with symptoms with your loved one? And they'll start thinking back and they think, oh my gosh, this might have gone back longer than we actually realized. And there's a denial. No one wants to think that their loved one has this disease. So they make accommodations for it. They make excuses for it. And it's very possible that family members have been seeing these signs. We often will have the person with dementia, when they are finally diagnosed, say, I started journaling 5 years ago when I got lost the first time going to visit my granddaughter, or going to the grocery store that I've been going to back and forth for 50 years. And so you start piecing things back together. It's a lot of retrospective analyzing on where they think they might have seen some of the signs. And so unfortunately, it can be a disease that can go on for a couple of decades.
I guess so. Listening to what you're saying, and how do we distinguish, or can we distinguish, between something that is, oh, I lost my keys and I can't find them, and oh my God, I need to worry about this because I can't find my keys?
We absolutely can do that, Dom. And when people start hitting their 60s, 60 to 65, they lose their keys, they worry. There's this incredible fear that captivates them because they think, oh my gosh, is something wrong with me? So what we always say is definitely, there's a normal aging process. There's also something called age-associated memory loss that could be happening as well. But there really are warning signs of Alzheimer's. And that is really important for your listeners to know, because I'm going to give you the example of the keys. How many of us lose our keys? Oh my goodness gracious, it's probably the most common thing you hear about. But if you actually go to your mom's house and her keys are in the refrigerator and she doesn't realize that that is not the right place to put them, that is a trigger that there's something going on. We're not saying it's Alzheimer's, we're just saying it's something that's going on. The loss of executive function. We have a lot of folks that come to our organization who were very successful in the corporate world, ran businesses, were financial planners, and they ended up losing their businesses, making very poor decisions, not being able to balance their checkbooks anymore. That is that's a real huge trigger for a potential sign of the executive function loss that could be coming with Alzheimer's.
And we're about ready to go into a break, but when we come back, you said something before I want to touch on dementia and Alzheimer's, because there is a difference, right?
There is, and it would be great if I can describe what those words mean.
You're listening to the No Nonsense Roundtable here every Saturday, 10 to 11 on News Radio Wham 1180. Or if you would like to hear the shows on YouTube, you can go to our website, nononsenseroundtable.com, and get any of the previous shows and listen to them there. So there's more than one way to get your dose of the No Nonsense Roundtable. I'm here with Teresa, who is the executive director of the Alzheimer Association for Rochester and the Finger Lakes. And before the break, we were talking about dementia and Alzheimer's, and making the point that they're actually two different things. I think everybody thinks that, well, most people think it's the same thing, but it's not.
Right, Dom. And actually, dementia is, if you can picture an umbrella of symptoms, the cognitive loss, change in behavior, inability to communicate, loss of executive function, those are the dementia symptoms. And under that umbrella of dementia, there is a world of dementia-related illnesses. Alzheimer's is a dementia. It is one of the most common. It is actually the single most common. About 60% of dementia cases are Alzheimer's disease dementia cases. There's also Lewy body dementia, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, vascular dementia. There are a variety of frontotemporal dementia, which is very common. So there are a variety of other dementias, and they are all considered in a class of dementias. So we sometimes use Alzheimer's and dementia interchangeably, but it's actually dementia defines the array of symptoms that happen and this class of diseases.
Do you have any figures about how many Alzheimer's patients we have in this area, or as a percent of the population, or total number?
Yes, so I'll take it at the national level. 6.2 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's disease today. In New York State alone, we have 410,000 New Yorkers who are living with this. And if we cannot stop this disease or slow it, we will see almost a 13% increase in that number in the next 25 years, just in New York alone.
That's amazing. And you say ultimately it's fatal.
Ultimately, today it is fatal.
Let me ask you a question. Let me backtrack to the top of the umbrella with the dementia question. Is it inevitable that most people get some type of dementia in their lives if they live long enough, or is it something that you have to expect getting some type of it, no matter how mild or not?
That is such a good question, Dom. So the number one risk factor for Alzheimer's disease is age. So the older you get, the higher risk you have. At 65, it's 1 in 8 Americans will get Alzheimer's. If you hit the point of 85, it's approximately 50%. But it is not inevitable for us to get Alzheimer's or any type of dementia unless your risk factors are there because of age, and there are other lifestyle risk factors as well.
Yeah, let's talk about that. That's fascinating. What are the lifestyle risk factors?
So the Alzheimer's Association has funded a study called the U.S. Pointer Study, and this study is actually determining whether or not lifestyle can reduce the risk of getting the disease or potentially slow the progression of the disease through the lifestyle factors. Those lifestyle factors are everything we read about in every wellness journal, that you eat a Mediterranean-style lifestyle. So you look at your diet, and you try to curb bad fats and things like that. So if you follow the Mediterranean diet, your potential risk for getting Alzheimer's could be lower. Also, socialization is incredibly important. Reducing isolation, which I do want to talk a little bit about the pandemic in a couple moments if there's time.
Sure.
So that's another factor. Doing things like being an adult learner and constantly challenging your brain to advance, to learn a new instrument, to do crosswords, to do some really not sitting on a computer and playing solitaire. It's that real challenging your mind and your brain. We're looking at those lifestyle factors to see if, in fact, we could potentially not only reduce the risk of getting the disease, but perhaps slow the progression down.
This begs a question. My wife, Nita, is involved in an organization called Osher Lifelong Learning, and mainly retired people at a certain age. And some of them teach courses. She teaches a course in Bollywood movies and Indian culture. And some people take the courses. So what you're saying is that something like that can be very good for people to keep their mind active, and a lifestyle, the thing that people should consider doing.
Absolutely. Bridge very complex things. Always challenge yourself. Push yourself. Don't sit in front of the TV. Get out. Walking, jogging, biking, swimming, interactive. All of those things that we talk about anyway for a healthy lifestyle are sure to help your brain.
So what you're saying, in essence, to put it another way, is your brain is a muscle that needs to be needs to be exercised.
And it deserves to be, absolutely.
And that helps mitigate some of the symptoms of dementia and Alzheimer's.
It could. The studies have shown that these types of activities could actually slow the progression. That's why we're doing the study in this country, and the association has committed to it. We've committed millions of dollars because we truly believe we're partnering with YMCAs and certain markets around the country, and it's all scientifically based, all evidence-informed, evidence-based research that's taking place to determine whether or not we can show the evidence so that we can say this is a public health disease, but look at the evidence for you to be able to change potentially the course of your life as you age.
What are some of the misconceptions?
So there is a misconception about Alzheimer's disease, as I said at the very beginning, about the fact that there is a misconception that it could be just normal aging. And so what we want to do is we want to really let your listeners know that Alzheimer's disease, if there are triggers, during the pandemic, there was a lot of isolation going on. Mm-hmm. Families were staying locked down with family members they hadn't typically or traditionally been with. And they're saying, oh my gosh, I had no idea my mom's behaviors. I had no idea she didn't know how to cook that wonderful meal anymore. I didn't realize that my dad doesn't know how to do his laundry anymore. That is not normal aging. There is something going on. Mm-hmm. There's confusion setting in. They're not doing the things that they loved before. There could be some apathy. It's very possible that those things might have something to do with all of that. And so there's a lot of that I want your listeners to know. Don't be afraid to reach out to us. We are available 24/7. We have a 1-800 phone number, 1-800-272-3900. That phone is manned by licensed social workers 24 hours a day. I would rather you called us and said, I just saw my mom do this. Should I be worried? Or I just did this myself. Should I be worried? Talk to us and we can talk through what the real early warning signs might be. And there are also ways to rule out the disease because there are other events and situations that could mask the symptoms. So, for example, depression, anxiety, malnutrition, social isolation, and other things like that could cause some of the warning signs of Alzheimer's. So we have to back it up and work through what is it that might be at that root cause. And the number one thing that we're going to tell you, call your doctor. Talk to your doctor.
And what I just heard from you, if I heard you right, is that you're encouraging people to contact you directly and talk to an actual human being.
All the time.
My
Absolutely.
Lord, that's wonderful. That says a lot about your organization. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say you have a website. What's your website?
We do. It's alz.org/RochesterNY.
Well, I'm Dom Genova, your host, every Saturday, 10 to 11 on News Radio WHAM 1180, where we are right now. And my guest this week is Teresa Galbier, who is the Executive Director of the Alzheimer's Association of Rochester and the Finger Lakes. Very important organization and something that we all need to know more about. And at the bottom of the hour, I always like to give a shout out to the Bob Johnson Auto Group, who sponsors my show and lets me do what I am doing right now. A great place to buy a car or truck or get a car or truck serviced. And thank them for doing that. And with that, we'll get back to Teresa. Now, before the end of the last break, we were talking about misconceptions, and and during the news break, we were kind of talking back and forth. I mean, there's some silly things out there that people think about Alzheimer's, aren't there?
There are, Dom. You know, it's interesting because a few years ago I was watching the news and I saw a report out on a study that was done about cigarette smoking. And it was suggested that if you smoked, I don't remember, 2-3 cigarettes a day, you could reduce your risk of dementia. And it was a bona fide study that was talked about on the news, and we got calls about it. And I said, well, first of all, study could mean 5 people are in a study or 3 people. So what I always do is I take this as an opportunity to educate the person who's contacted us to say, how many people were in the study? Is it a gold standard study? And a gold standard means that there's a placebo group and then a study group, and neither of them know what they're taking, right? And so, but you have to look at sheer numbers. And if you've had 3 or 5 or even 10 people in a study somewhere out in Southern Europe or something like that, you really need to question what's the validity of that. Oftentimes, those are sensational studies that just grab attention. So we always recommend, anytime you hear about any silly little things like aluminum pans and the fillings in your teeth, don't go getting your teeth pulled out because you saw that study on the news. So
to kind of paraphrase what you're saying, we know that smoking causes cancer. Everybody subscribes to that now. There's nobody denying that anymore. It does cause cancer. There's nothing specifically that causes Alzheimer's. Am I hearing this thing right?
So, yes. Well, okay. So, for the most part, the numbers that I was sharing earlier, the 6.2 million Americans who have Alzheimer's today, the 410,000 New Yorkers, age is the greatest risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. So if you say something caused it, for the majority of the population, it was something that happened to you.
Okay, but what I'm saying is that there's nothing behaviorally that I can take a look at and make a correlation between Alzheimer's and not. And we're all getting older, and I can't avoid that. But there's nothing that you're saying this causes Alzheimer's, right?
Well, the cause and effect is not clear. The evidence doesn't show that. But there are things that can increase your risk. Hypertension, diabetes, things like that, heart disease, vascular disease. Those will absolutely increase your risk. Brain injury has an impact as well. There was a study done with the NFL and concussions. The concussion protocols have changed dramatically within the pop leagues at the local level and at the children at the formative years when your brain is still developing. So there are actually cause and effect that can increase your risk by things like that. Brain injury has shown that as well. So there are some things that will cause you to have a higher risk of getting Alzheimer's disease. Is it 100% you'll get it if you have a brain injury? No. But you've just gone into a higher risk pool. There is also a genetic component, and it's a rare population of people in this country, but there are studies being done. There's something called Diane study in South America. There's this family that has thousands of family members over the generations that have gotten the disease at very young ages, 30, 40, 50 years old. So there are genetic precursors that if you have certain genes, you will get Alzheimer's disease. So
let's talk about when you go visit a healthcare provider, what are they going to be asking you, or how are they going to make a diagnosis? And then tell me about the treatments. Our hope is that if you tell your doctor that you're worried, that they start doing workups. And the workups are very comprehensive. There is a mini mental status exam. We call it the MMSE, the clock drawing. There's a lot of names for it. We would hope the physician would start that process because they can do that in their offices. They should do blood work to determine if there are some other nutritional or other deficiencies going on. They should do the scale or the interview about the depression scale, which is now very common within doctors' offices, where they start asking you about, have you been depressed? If you have, then they probe deeper. So there are things that they can look at. The medications that you're on. Are you taking any homeopathic types things that might have interactions and things like that? That would be the ideal. That's the ideal that we want to see happen in the medical community. Does it happen all the time? It does not. So that's what you have to do, is advocate for your doctor to recognize that you are worried and that you want them to do a workup. And so then what do the treatments look like? So as I mentioned earlier, there's no prevention, there's no cure, and today there is no full treatment that will stop the disease. A year ago, in July of 2021, almost a year ago now, the FDA gave provisional approval to a drug that we call aducanumab, Aduhelm. It is the first treatment, actual treatment for the early stage people with Alzheimer's disease. It's an infusion treatment. It's incredibly expensive. But if you think about, Alzheimer's was discovered in 1904, and this is the first time there's actually a treatment out there. It's a very hot issue, Dom. It's controversial for a lot of reasons. The medical community is polarized about this because it hadn't shown promise in certain populations later in the disease, but it showed promise in some. The Alzheimer's Association is advocating strongly for this drug because we believe you have to have a first in class, right? You've got to try something that has shown promise. I had a gentleman tell me recently about his wife. He said, when you are living with a fatal disease, you need hope. And this one is giving families hope.
incredibly expensive. They've actually knocked the price down a bit. Unfortunately, this week we were dealt a real blow by advocates around the country. The Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services provisionally in their draft decision decided not to approve payment of this infusion treatment. And they're saying only in clinical trials. So what it has done is it's built a huge disparity for African Americans, Latinos, and particularly women who are not part of typical clinical trials. We do have one here at the University of Rochester Medical Center. They are doing the infusion treatment in the phase 3 trial of aducanumab. But when you draw a line in the sand that you will not pay for something, you have now eliminated an entire population to be able to benefit from this medication. Our hope is that they reverse that decision in April when they make their final decision. It's really controversial, Dom, but at the end of the day, there's got to be a first-in-class for any type of drug. It's the only disease that doesn't have a first-in-class treatment right now compared to cancer, HIV, any of the others. And so we're saying, let's try to get this to the general public and let's get it affordable so that people can get the infusion and that it could potentially work. But you have to be in certain stages of the disease. We recognize that.
Well, it seems to me that if you have a drug and is against a disease that is ultimately fatal, the only downside I would be worried about is making it fatal sooner.
True. You will also hear from neurologists who say that there are some complications with this infusion, and we know that. We recognize that. There could be some brain swelling and things like that. So there are risks. But I have families sit across the table from me every single day who say, I want to be able to take the risk. Let me take it, and I'll choose whether or not to.
Good point. You're listening to the No Nonsense Roundtable. We're here today with Teresa Galbier, who is the Executive Director of the Alzheimer's Association for the Finger Lakes and Rochester. One of the things that I heard in the past 40 minutes or so is that you have a telephone number and people that you can talk to, real human beings, when somebody has a question about Alzheimer's, about themselves or a loved one. And let's talk more about that, because I think that's really extraordinary.
The Alzheimer's Association has a helpline. It's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at 1-800-272-3900. Licensed social workers will take your calls. They can talk to you at all hours of the day or night about anything that might be troubling you. If you have a simple question, if you want to understand what the warning signs of Alzheimer's disease are. And we also have a language line. So if you do not speak English, we can find a translator for you in over 200 languages. They can talk to you in your own language and walk you through the steps of what you need to take better care of yourself, of your loved one, and to understand this disease better.
So tell me that telephone number again, please.
The phone number is 1-800-272-3900.
And it's for anybody with any questions at all about Alzheimer's, whether they're talking about themselves or a loved one. And you're saying any time of the day or night, right? Any
time of the day or night. And oftentimes our phone calls, our phones are ringing even more often in the middle of the night, because that's when the family member might feel isolated, and they're sad, they're angry, they have great despair, and they just need a warm, competent voice on the other end to be able to talk through what they might be going through. We have people themselves who call and say, I think I might have done something at work that I would have never done before. I don't know how to handle this. I think I might be having memory issues. I'm afraid I'm going to lose my job. How do I get through this? And that person on the other end is going to help them to understand what they should be doing.
Yeah, that's very comforting. Give me the phone number one more time.
The phone number is 1-800-272-3900.
Wow, that's extraordinary service to the community. Now, let's talk about, we were talking about treatments before, right?
We were talking about the aducanumab and Aduhelm that I was sharing with you about. We also encourage our families. We have programs and services that we deliver throughout the year in our 9-county region in the Rochester Finger Lakes area. As I mentioned earlier about the helpline, in our 9-county region alone, over the last 20 months, we fielded over 11,000 phone calls.
Wow.
We delivered 1,000 programs and services, from support groups to educational programs to also sharing information about your brain health, taking care of your brain and body. And we actually had over 17,600 engagements with our constituents in our 9 counties. And, it's interesting because we couldn't do it without a army of volunteers. I call it our army with heart. We have a small team of staff, but it's our partnership with our volunteers in our community that really helps us to be able to deliver all this, because we'd never be able to have over 17,000 interactions without these incredible treasured volunteers. Some of our volunteers have been with the chapter for over 20 years. Some joined us just a few months ago. We are always looking for volunteers. And if any of your listeners are interested in volunteering in our organization, I would love for them to give us a call. Volunteers can be anywhere from an event to help us on Walk Day for our Walk to End Alzheimer's, or to be able to deliver support groups throughout the year.
So tell me about some of the events then.
So the events that we have throughout the year, we have the Walk to End Alzheimer's. In the fall, it takes place in Rochester, the Finger Lakes area, as well as this last year we brought it to Watkins Glen International Raceway. And Michael Printum, the CEO of Watkins Glen, is partnering with us for us to be able to bring it back there again. I think I can boast and say it might be the only walk that's on an international raceway today.
It sounds like a lot of fun.
It's awesome. It's really awesome, Dom. We also have, every year we have a gala, but this year's going to be extra special. We are celebrating 40 years of service to our community. So we will be hosting a gala on May 19th at the Rochester Riverside Convention Center, and we would love to have people join us. We plan to be in person at this point. We're very hopeful that we will be. We have plenty of room at the convention center to stretch out. It will be a formal gala, and we are really hoping for corporate sponsors, for table sales, and for people to just want to participate.
Well, let's tell everybody about your website one more time.
Our website for our chapter is alz.org/Rochester NY. If someone's not comfortable calling our 1-800 number and they just want to gather information, it's chock full. It has the warning signs. It shows our programs and services. It talks about the misconceptions, some of the things we were talking about earlier. It talks about how to caregive through the holidays, how to respond to behaviors and communication and things like that. So if they just want to spend a lot of time in the Alzheimer's Association nationwide over the last year, there were 7.3 million people who went on our website and interacted with us. And when we say interacted, they actually stayed on long enough to make it meaningful for them.
So other programs and meetings and stuff you have going on?
Dom, we have a wonderful array of programs coming up this year, a variety of conferences and workshops. I want to bring one up in particular. We have the African American Health Symposium. It takes place annually. This is our 11th annual. It will be at Anon Baptist Church in partnership with Anthony Jordan Health Center and a variety of others. We're working with the Minority Reporter as well. It's so important for our listeners to understand that this is a disease that affects all populations, but it disproportionately affects certain other populations. Women are highly impacted by it. We have, for African American population, the risk for getting Alzheimer's is twice that in the general population. For Hispanic Latinos, it's 1.5 times greater incidence. So we're talking about, it's unfortunately a disease that has its own disparities built into it. So we always encourage people to participate in research, clinical trials, to phone us, to reach out to us so that we can walk you through how we can support you on your journey.
It's amazing the things that are under your purview. Let me ask you again to repeat the telephone number in case people need to call you for whatever reason. I still am amazingly impressed with the fact that you could call somebody in the middle of the night, or you have anxiety about an issue, and there's a human being to talk to. That's amazing to me in this day and age.
And we want people to know that they don't have to walk this journey alone. They often do. They isolate themselves. Sometimes their friends and neighbors isolate them when they start seeing that they're acting differently and they're uncomfortable around them. So we want them to know we will always be there for them. 1-800-272-3900, 24/7.
Well, it's amazing what you do. Well, we're coming to the end of the show. Last words.
The Alzheimer's Association is the single greatest advocate for people with Alzheimer's and those who care about them in the world. And because of our advocacy efforts, that we have thousands and thousands of advocates, boots on the ground, advocating on the Hill, our state capitals and our federal capitals. And we have been able to influence legislation that has positively impacted those with Alzheimer's and those who care about them. Today, we can boast that we have a $3.2 billion funding stream with the United States Congress for Alzheimer's science. Is that enough? Absolutely not. But it is a step in the right direction, Dom. And with those efforts, we're going to support the scientific community so that they can find a cure for this disease, they can take it out, and that we can someday celebrate a world without Alzheimer's disease.
Well, Teresa, it's been a delight having you on the show, and thank you for what you do, and God bless you for what you do, because I have to tell you, it's a worthwhile organization, and everybody needs to know more about the Alzheimer's disease. And with that, another show in the wrapper. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week on the No Nonsense Roundtable.